Hi everyone, I'm in a place right now where you shouldn't be, and this is the town. So I want to talk about the topic town is lava and what it means for your efficiency in especially farming XP in Diablo 3. Paragon farming is the #1 way to progress after you have reached the end game in Diablo 3. So after you have geared up, you have gotten your first set of augments, you're like Paragon 1500 or so. This is usually the point where you start grinding mostly for XP and not really for much else anymore. And this is also where a lot of the end game power progression comes from. So this is nothing really new. I guess almost everyone who has ever progressed past 1500 is completely aware of this. But there is definitely optimizations you want to do to keep your downtime as low as possible, because it actually has a huge effect on your overall efficiency. I can give you a little example. So we have some example calculation here. We want to farm from Paragon 2000 to Paragon 3000. We farm 4-man GR 120s, let's say gold speedruns or inner speedruns or something like this. Average time is 2 minutes, and the average time spent in town is 30 seconds. Now 30 seconds is extremely fast. The minimum time it requires you to pick up the loot, upgrade 4 gems and go back to town is roughly 20 seconds. And then someone needs to close, that's like another second or so. Then there's no gambling, there's no sorting loot, there's no salvaging involved, and you have probably like 8 to 9 seconds from that point if you want to be as fast as this. And there are ways to do that, which I'm going to show you in a second. Now if you look at this, you would farm around 4.5 trillion XP per hour on this level in 4-man, just blasting this, let's say 4 hours a day. You would get to your goal in 14.7 days, so 2 weeks roughly. Now, if you're slow and you can't really sort out your loot very fast, and sometimes someone is slacking a bit, going AFK or whatever, and your average downtime increases from 30 seconds to, let's say, 60 seconds, you would have to add a whole 3 days to your goal. So your efficiency goes down almost 20% in XP per hour to 3.8 trillion per hour. Just from the little bit of time that doesn't sound like very much, but since speedruns are so fast and the downtime is so much, it actually plays a huge role. I can also show you a real example. So this is from our runs here. We have a handy timer here in the corner. So you see the boss dies at 3 seconds. And now we count the seconds until we're out of the rift, which is at 20. So this was 17 seconds later. I didn't have the spread loot, I had the stacked loot. So it was easy for me to pick up the loot. And I only upgraded 4 gems. And now someone goes to close. And this would be around 19 to 20 seconds, as I just described. And now you can also try to gamble really quickly, get your stuff sorted out and go into the next rift. But until we actually start the next run, around 34 seconds have passed. And this is with a group that is already quite experienced and they know exactly what kind of loot they want. They are pretty fast at sorting out their stuff. And it can definitely get much worse than this. So 30 seconds on average is an extremely optimistic estimate. For the most part, I would say something like 45 seconds is quite achievable for like the long-term farming. Depends a bit on how experienced you are and how much loot you want to keep. For example, I usually keep a lot of loot. Like I keep all the stats usually. I keep a lot of different items. I keep a lot of different stuff that I can use for even meme builds in some cases. But for example, if you know that you're only going to play your inner monk, for example, you don't need any Symboko pieces, you don't need any Raymond pieces, you don't need any POJ, you can essentially insta-salvage like 90% of the loot and not really care about anything. There's only like 15 different items you're going to save, maybe some ethereals, and that's it. Obviously, in those cases, it's much faster to sort out your loot, to gamble for the right thing. For example, if you're usually quite slow in your town rotations and everyone has to wait for you, what you can do is gamble rings instead of gambling some armor piece or some offhand, because rings only take half the amount of slots in the inventory and they also cost twice as much. So you gamble them extremely fast and you don't have to run between Kadala and the blacksmith like 5 times to empty your blood shards. You can do it all in one go most of the time and you're much faster at salvaging. Now apart from this, there's one other very important strategy that we use to reduce our downtime, and that is the so-called Christmas box. So what we mean with that is that every 2 hours of group sessions, we identify all the loot that you kept. And other than this, we salvage everything instantly that we don't want to keep. So essentially, you make some space in your stash. So So for example, here I have like 2 almost empty stash tabs. It used to be more, but right now I'm filling it up with some other stuff. So my Christmas box is quite small, but somewhere between like 3 to 5 stash tabs, completely empty, is extremely good, even if you keep a lot of loot, to just throw everything in there unidentified, and you never touch the Book of Cain to identify your loot until 2 hours have passed. Why is it 2 hours? Well, because after 2 hours, when you're playing in groups, the loot will become untradeable and you can't share it to your teammates in case you find something really good for them. So you want to make sure that you don't let the items time out. Obviously, you don't have to stick to this 2 hours exactly. So sometimes you also do like a smaller session and someone leaves or whatever. So we just identify the loot whenever we are done. Or for example, in solo, I also do this sometimes. So when I do really fast solo runs, I try to minimize my downtime. I throw in the loot there, and you don't have to worry about it until a later point. The problem with Book of Cain is it's extremely slow, and almost all the time you get like 90% trash loot that you're gonna salvage anyway. So there's no need to identify this, you just salvage it. And everything that you want to keep for later, you throw in here, and then you take it out again with a few clicks. You identify it, and you will have a full inventory of actually useful items that you want to keep and identify. The big advantage is not just the identifying, but also that you can sort the items together at the same time and not always have to think about what is going to be a good roll, what is potentially an upgrade. Essentially everything that looks like an upgrade or could be an upgrade, I just throw back in until an even later point when I have gathered like 5 different pairs of gloves and maybe 3 different weapons or something like this, and then eventually I will just compare all the stuff. Now obviously that depends a bit on how late you are in your progression. So very early in the season it doesn't really make sense to delay upgrading your gear that much, but later on when the upgrades are very marginal and you get like 1% damage there, a bit of defense there, it doesn't really matter all that much if you keep farming with like a slightly worse item or not. What's most important is that you keep up your efficiency, because as you have seen, your efficiency can go down a lot just from slacking in town. Because the share of downtime in this game is so high compared to actual playtime in Diablo 3, there is actually this huge advantage of maximizing your town efficiency, to the point where a lot of parties, especially at the very high end, essentially automate most of that town process so that they can just get even more time spent in the rifts to increase the XP per hour. So this is usually how it's done for like the very end game parties that use a lot of cheats. I'm not going to go too much into the details of that, but there are definitely tools that people use where like essentially the entire inventory gets auto salvaged minus the 1 or 2 pieces that you want to keep. So obviously this is like a huge benefit, and essentially it leads to those higher paragon gains that some people have. You don't really have to worry too much about it most of the time. Like even I am like a rather slow player in town, simply because of what I described with all the loot I keep, because I don't use any kind of macros. I'm not even using a gamble macro, so I do everything by hand, and I still try to keep up with everyone else basically. So what you should take away from this video is that downtime matters. Town is lava, and you never want to spend time in town ever. Unless, of course, you have to do something in town, like you're upgrading items, or you're re-rolling a ring, or you do anything else that is like not part of the actual gameplay. So usually I do these kind of things in a T16 game. Usually I always play T16 in a party. I know a lot of you guys probably don't because of Canes and Sage and all that kind of stuff, but many builds can include Cain set as an item swap easily in the T16 setups. And this is usually what I do. So for example, on my monk, I just swap to 2 Cain pieces and kill the boss myself with Cains equipped, and you don't need a follower for this at all to get the extra keys. So whenever I play, I do it in groups, and in T16 it usually doesn't matter if 1 or 2 or even 3 people are slacking in town doing nothing. So I let other people do their crafting or sorting their loot or whatever, and sometimes I do my crafting there as well. I do my rerolling items, etc. Always in T16 games. You don't want to do this in GR games. GR sessions are always blaster sessions for us, because this is how you don't waste the time, how you stay efficient, and how you can reach the high paragons at a faster time. So that's what I wanted to share here for now. Make sure that you maybe check for yourself how to maybe not waste so much time in town, how to sort out your loot faster. You can try to salvage items without actually identifying them when you see which item it is. So try to learn their icons, try to learn what you need for your builds that you want to play, and don't really keep too much like useless stuff. Just, you know, maybe it's like a pretty roll or whatever. So you don't want to clutter your space too much. So I hope that this helps you. Hope you got some helpful tips on this. Hope you liked the video, and I'll see you guys next time.